Noble goals for noble souls, transforming our world to a better wonder to behold. No poverty, zero hunger, for the elderly or younger. Good health and well-being, good education, empowering women to become sensations. Clean water and sanitation, is it not the right of every nation? Economic growth, inclusive and sustained, through industry, innovation and infrastructure be gained. Reduce inequality for sure, make cities and human settlements safe and secure. Take urgent actions to combat climate change, conserve, let below water, land, ensure we do not estrange. Justice for all, oh peaceful and empathetic nations. Let us all partner to achieve these goals and provide much needed salvation.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining. A very good morning, good evening, namaste, hola, bonjour, gerimate, darve, yamarapan. This is Namya Joshi, your host for the day. Welcome to episode 119 of the podcast Each One Teach 10, an amazing world of STEM. An inspiring venture where we'll be discussing that STEM is a part of every day for every kid. We all will learn together how to build a STEM culture. Well, for today, I'm really thrilled to welcome a special guest on the 119th episode of the podcast. That is Tim Needles. Hey, how are you doing today?
Hey, how's it going? Good to see you.
Thank you. It's good for me. How about you?
Pretty good. I am, it's a nice morning here. I know it's evening where you are, but it's a pleasure to be here. I've been following your podcast, and your book, and it's funny. It's nice to talk to you, after seeing you for so many years.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot. And I'm really glad to have you on board on today's episode. So, before we start, I'd love to give a short introduction about Tim to you. Well, he is an artist, educator, performer, and author of STEAM Pa, Infusing Art into Your STEAM Curriculum. Tim is also a TEDx speaker, technology integration specialist, and teaches art, film, and emerging media at Smithtown School District and Fivetown College. His accolades include ISTE's Technology in Action Award and Creativity Award, NAEA's Eastern Region Art Educator Award, and ArtEdTech Outstanding Teacher Award. He's also serving as a board member of NYSCATE and NYSATA and is a National Geographic Certified Teacher, NASA Solar System Ambassador, Adobe Creative Educator, and much more. And really honored to have you on board today. So, like I mentioned about your book, in your book, you talk about art being integral, like not just an add on to STEM. That's a really bold shift from the traditional view. So, how does seeing art as an essential, transform dynamics and student learning in the classroom?
It really is transformative, I will tell you. And when I was writing my book, I'm an artist myself. So before I'm even teaching, I'm an artist. So I understood the word through art, and I wanted to make sure that this was also true in the real world. So when I was interviewing people from NASA, I would ask them like, how does an art play a role in what you do? And I was surprised at how big a role it played. So even in like, whether it's a Brookhaven National Labs I talked to, and I talked to coders, I talked to scientists, I talk to engineers. And oftentimes, one of the core aspects is design. So, like, good design makes a difference in whatever you're doing. And design is fundamental to art. But art's also about communication, and it gives you a different perspective of understanding. So, I think that's another really big thing. Um, and then, of course, creativity. So, like, creativity is something that is just an integral part of art. It really builds your creative confidence. And that's one of the things I think in our, increasingly AI centric world of education where technology plays such a role. We need people to bring the creativity to the tools. And that's one of the things that really art offers. Because I was always interested in STEM. I always loved playing and making and coding and robotics and all of these different elements. But I was always kind of questioning, like, oh, how could we use this differently? Artists will break the rules a lot, and I think it's really helpful sometimes to pivot and consider different perspectives. And that's one of the things that art really offers. So, like, even when I talked to NASA, they were hiring artists to figure out origami so they could figure out how to fold the space telescope and put it into the rocket and have it unfold. And they were hiring creative people with food to make food without any crumbs and things like that. And it's becoming a more international world where you have all these different perspectives, and I think that's tremendous. But I think as artists, we think visually oftentimes, so it does give us a perspective of understanding, even if language is a barrier.
Absolutely, that's really well said. And of course, like listening to what you talked about, what stood out to me is like how this doesn't come from theory, but from lived experience as an artist yourself. And you questioned whether art truly mattered in this real world. You spoke to people across different fields and realized that, designing, communication, and creativity sit down at the core of how STEM actually functions. And like, of course, I really liked about how in an AI centric world, we tend to step out and think more creatively. And that's what the human side of, working with AI has at par. And, for seeing these changes from doing things correctly to thinking deeply and visually is equally important. So thank you for sharing that. Right. So I also noticed that in the second edition of STEAM part includes chapters on AI, on such, of course, a timely edition. So, how do you see AI reshaping creativity in the K to 12 classrooms?
Yeah, it's hard to have any book on education now that doesn't address AI. So it's really important to do, obviously. And I think I deal with AI differently than many other educators because it's like, I am sort of hungry for the knowledge about, where this is going, because I feel like with artificial intelligence, if you're not ahead of it, you're sort of behind it because it's just moving so fast. I've never seen any technology move this quick. So I feel like, especially with AI, uh, one of the things it's not very good at is being creative. Like, you need to understand how to prompt, you need to understand how to be creative with the tool. And I kind of treat AI like any other tool. Essentially, it is like the internet, it is like a pencil. And as an artist, it's like I kind of look at it as like, oh, well, how can I use this in an interesting, innovative way? Because lots of people are using it in, the way sort of like it's prescribed. There's lots of different prompts out there that people are using, but I don't want to be doing the same thing as everyone else. Like, I'm trying to think of, more innovative solutions that I might be able to use AI to my advantage to help solve. So I think creative problem solving is something that's really interesting, especially, I'm very, like you, involved in the environment, and I think that AI is both a potential tremendous asset in solving some environmental problems, at the same time as it's causing some other environmental problems that need to be addressed. So, it's sort of like on both ends of the spectrum. And I'm also very involved in quantum because quantum computing is going to be the essential way to use AI. So, I'm in a quantum program now at Stony Brook University, really learning quantum so I could help teach it. And so that students could understand how it works, because it's a very sticky subject. So once you kind of get into the world of quantum, all the rules of science are a little bit different. So really interesting. But I feel like, we need to bring that creative thinking, that innovation to the tool. So, especially because it has, like, I feel bad about the environmental impact of, all of these people using AI, and it's like there's the problem we have now and the problem that we will have in 2 or 3 years because the usage is just going up. When you're Googling something, it costs something like 0.002 cents. But for each incarnation, if you're using an AI tool to ask a question, it's costing literally 2 cents. So the finances, the environmental impact are major. So you really need to be creative with how these tools could be used. And making sure that students, I mean, like, it's disrupting every industry. The world is sort of changing drastically and very quickly, and you sort of want to have an idea of what that landscape looks like in order to make the biggest impact. So when I talk to my students, I talk to them about where we are now, where we're going, and how to really use that creative lens to work with AI as a problem-solving tool for really things that are important, that matter, right? So, less like, social media, more like environmental impact, and, real, kind of looking at the sustainable development goals and like, how could we plug this in and help some of these issues with AI in a creative way?
True, and that again is a really good example of how problem solving and thinking about the society come together in one role. And what really comes through is that AI doesn't make creativity optional, it makes it essential. And I think recently during the podcast, many of the guests, including yourself, have been highlighting this fact, and which is important for the people who think that AI is just for, getting work done, but it's gonna help you in a way to get smarter. And if you're not thinking ahead, like you said, we're already behind AI because it's like advancing really fast.
Yeah.
And AI itself isn't creative. It depends on, of course, how well we prompt. And that's rightly said, that because how differently we use it and the intent behind it really helps us to get the desired result. And when we think about K to 12 classrooms, that shift focuses on to creative thinking, experimentation, and of course the responsible use of it, especially like when we're moving and emerging into areas like quantum learning. So of course it has to be used in a mindful way. And of course, I'm really glad that you highlighted the point of the environmental impact of these technologies. And that is why we need to be mindful of how to use it, when to use it, and what is the purpose of, your prompt. So yeah, and of course, these are the sectors which have to be worked upon so that, the climate impact can be reduced and we can be more mindful and understand when to prompt and how to prompt while using AI.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Right. So I have another question for you. Your work spans on, so many creative mediums like coding, robotics, VR, AR, photography, digital drawing, animation. So how do you decide, which medium best fits a learning objective?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, I think, oftentimes a couple of different mediums would work. So, when I look at the sort of the content that I'm teaching in class, I consider a couple things. So, I consider like where my students are at, because I think that's an important factor. Sometimes after a longer project, you want something that's a little bit faster. I think pacing is a piece of it. Um, and every student group is different. Like, I started doing a lot of performance, so improv and stand-up comedy and storytelling and playwriting, and you get to really know the audience really well. So I think one thing I always consider is the audience, the students that are in the classroom. Like, what do they need right now? That's a factor, because the truth is, like, as a creative person, I feel like I could use any tool to teach content. So like, you just understand the thread that kind of goes through, like in storytelling, we use the word through line. So there's a through line in education as well. So like which tool you're using, there's some things that are going to be a much more natural fit, of course. Coding, you want to have like a base understanding, but now with like AI, you're able to vibe code and not really know code very well. So, the tools are always changing too. I mean, I just came back from the FETC conference in Florida, which is one of the bigger ones. And you see so many different uses of the tool, and the tools are all changing, especially in the maker world. So I always like the creative challenge of, let me actually use the wrong tool to actually help teach here and use it in an interesting way, because you end up with different results So, I think there's always like, very simple technology. You could use cardboard and like basic supplies for anything. And then, any project. And then some things like virtual reality, augmented reality really lend towards um, if you're doing like space exploration or if you're doing, history. But, like I did I was in a virtual classroom this week, and we went to the moon to learn civics. So you wouldn't think civics and the moon, right? But it made it for a much more interesting civics lesson than your traditional civics lesson. So I think that you could use almost any tools at your disposal. And, I always, as an art person, I would go to colleagues that taught science and math and these other subjects. And I would say, like, let me know what your most difficult subject is, and I will help bring a creative perspective into it. And we'll do it with maker tools. So we'll use a STEAM project. Um, and, there's all these other things to consider. So if it's not my classroom we're working in, or we're not in a maker space, you don't have the same availability. So there's lots of different tools to use, especially now with so many online digital tools. So like I could use digital drawing to teach anything because like I could draw. So, it makes it really interesting. But you also want to consider the students and like what is their abilities, what will help them process this information in an interesting way. So the conduit through which you learn something actually changes the way you think of it. So I one of the things I do is I change the way I teach each year. So I'm not using the same lessons. I'm not using the same tools. I'm using different lessons all the time and then comparing and contrasting and what worked well. So a lot of it is just wisdom, which is just experience, right? So, there's certain things that like just work, like I'm a big fan of the band OK Go, and they have like OK Go Sandbox, and they're teaching almost everything through music, which is just a creative, interesting way to do it. Um, and if kids love music, that's going to really be powerful to them. So like it depends on your audience, I think. So a lot of it is knowing your students, and knowing what's going to fit the timeline you have, because teachers have all these limitations that you have to consider. But I think if you bring creativity to it, you can teach anything with any resources, and that's kind of key.
That's spot on. If you bring creativity into anything, you can teach anything in, whichever interesting way that you want. And that's really well said. And what I'm taking away is that the medium always follows the learner and the purpose, not the other way around. And you start, by understanding where the students are and who the audience is. And then you choose whatever tool best serves the concept. Even if it's a weird tool, you can teach in an interesting way, because we already know the tools will keep on changing, but what remains constant is how creative you are while teaching with the tools. And I also love your idea of the creative challenge. Like sometimes even using the wrong tool, like I said, could, make learning more engaging, like stepping into a VR moon classroom to understand physics. That's really interesting. And of course, like as an artist yourself, you're intentionally using creative perspectives to open up subjects that, might otherwise feel difficult or abstract to others. And that really gives other people more motivation to learn other different tools themselves, and get creative in their own way in their own classrooms. Right, that's really well said
Thank
again.
you.
Yeah. Also, one of my favorite ideas from your project is designing the classroom of the future using AI. So can you share a success story from that challenge, and what is revealed about student mindset from those?
Yeah, that is one of my favorite projects of all time. So I think it's important for a number of different reasons. So when I started as a teacher, like every classroom is, especially in the United States, like it's off white. It looks like an art classroom will look like a math classroom. There's no difference. And I'm like, you know, once I started kind of working with more, creative companies that were doing different kinds of work, and you get to go to like Google headquarters or Adobe headquarters. These are really exciting places with lots of color, and like they really consider the user experience. And traditional classrooms in the United States are all really still kind of stuck in the 1950s for some reason, and there's no reason for that. And then when I travel and I get to go to classrooms around the world, when I'm in Japan, like some of the classrooms are totally different, and they have different things. So this is something that I have learned more about as I travel. So travel is always one of the best teaching tools in the world, I think. Um, So, one of the things I will say is that I started out redesigning my classroom so that the students had a sense of ownership over their space because, uh, you have students that come in and they just don't feel comfortable. But if they help me actually redesign it, then they have a sense of ownership over the space, and it's our space. It's not my classroom, it's our classroom. And that became sort of a legacy project. So, we painted the walls, we redesigned the seating, and then what we started doing is doing more research and looking at creative spaces and like what's a creative space that really benefits learning. So, you need to study learning a little bit and kind of look at what kind of learners you have and like make sure that you're addressing all the different types of learners so that they all have a way to, have the best space possible. So we would do some sort of field trips to some different creative spaces, um, and then sort of like looking forward into the future. I think that traditional kind of like one person standing and lecturing classroom is kind of really moving away. And I like more makerspace approaches where there's lots of different tools and students have more agency to kind of do the projects that they want. So, you need to make room for that because, in a similar kind of way, the space is going to have an impact on what you're learning in it. So, even the best teacher, in a bad space, there's some limitations there. So, I think you are open to more concepts and more different things when the space sort of provides for it, and you don't realize the impact your environment has because like you're spending all your time there, and then it really does play a part. It is another character in the story, if you will. So we did a lot of work. We looked at like NASA. We looked at lots of different companies and the different ways that they could do spaces. And then, of course, the pandemic had a factor because then all of a sudden you weren't in a space. We were just in a digital space and you could really start from scratch. So I found that it was helpful to get some grants to fund some of these projects. And augmented reality is a great tool for pre-visualizing what redesigning a classroom would look like. So students could create all different kinds of designs and then see them in the space. Um, and then, going to some really kind of experimental schools where they were doing really interesting things, like the Blue School in New York City that was made by the Blue Man Tube Group, was really great because it's like such a creative place. That there's like little nooks for students to read all over the place, and maker, not just a maker space, but a maker library where you had just resources. Um, so this made just a massive shift in the feel of teaching. So the students had a greater sense of ownership and authority, and it became a more collaborative space, which was just better as an educator because there's lots of things that, especially in the world of like quick moving technology, that I don't know. So I think it also, as an educator, me kind of sharing that, like, listen, I don't know all the answers. I'm well versed in finding, how to address and figure it out. So like that made a difference too. So it became so much more collaborative, which is what you want from the future space of education. It's a more collaborative space where students are creating some of their own projects, and we're all equals, and they're bringing ideas to it. So it's a terrific project to start. It's something that you want to definitely scale up as you do it, and make sure that you do some research on like the different types of creative spaces and what the benefits are.
True that. In Finnish, it's called totta, so of course, like true that. And what really again stood out here is like the challenge that helps students question, the very idea of what a classroom really is. And you point out that many traditional classrooms like are still stuck in this 1950s mindset across the world even now. And even though learning spaces around the world are evolving. So it's, of course, by starting to redesign the classroom where students can take the real ownership of their own learning. And it, of course, like you said, turned out as a legacy project for you that pushed them to research what actually supports learning from it could be flexible spaces, field trips, to environments around that give you practical learning, and that also addresses the different kinds of learners, and that really reveals a future focused mindset where one person lectures give way to learner centered spaces which are really built for exploration and agency. And that reminds me like of a recent project that we had, like it was a project but it was a course for Flash, and we were having this client-based strategies that we were supposed to create. So even though it was a course where we were taught by the person and the lecturer about what exactly, could be the ideas that you can create, but at the end of the day, it's like several teams working together towards solving the problems. And I think that really is an example of how you can learn from different people, give your own perspectives, and create more collaborative spaces where everybody can learn, share, and move ahead at their own pace, but still get to understand the concepts at the same time.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. And that's the nice thing. I mean, like, it's something that I've worked on for now over 20 years. So it's like it just continues to grow, and it's a fantastic thing. And we're moving towards just more collaborative spaces. I think that's the key.
Absolutely. There's also a comment that I think sums it up, multigrated in teaching, holistic learning, of course.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that comment. Right. So I have a fun question to ask you. Which movie can you binge watch without getting tired of it?
Oh, that's a, I started out as a film teacher, so that's a that's a tough question. I mean, like, I'll tell you, like, one that I watch a lot is the Shawshank Redemption.
Oh.
One of the things is I'm just a curious person. So, like, in addition to being an artist, I've also worked in film, and I was a film
Mhm.
journalist. So, like, one of the real benefits of what I was doing is I had a chance to interview the directors, the writers, the actors in these movies. So,
Mhm.
I got to know them personally, and there's nothing more exciting than being able to just ask lots of questions about. But I always love uh, just the change that happens over the course of a movie like that. So, it's something that is empowering. There's this person that kind of like gets thrown into a space that is not comfortable to them, and they find a way to adapt, and then eventually persevere. So, like, I love a story with perseverance. I feel like that's all of our life stories.
Yeah.
So it's something I relate to.
That's really well said. Thank you for sharing that. And for me, I think I kind of actually really like watching movies which have an intense message that really helps you to understand, what exactly can you do with life and what exactly other perspectives you have to keep in mind. There are two, if like it's a serious mood, then there's this movie called A Quiet Place.
Oh yeah.
It's really good. I mean, it's kind of scary, but the message behind it is important. And if it's a fun mood, then Home Alone all the way. I watch it every time during Christmas. So these are the two ones.
That's great. I went to college with Buzz, the older brother from Home Alone. So I went to art
Oh,
school in New York City, School of Visual Arts, with Devin, who played Buzz. So yeah, it
yeah.
was fun. I always got to hear lots of fun stories behind the scenes of Home Alone.
Wow, that's so great. I mean, that's really amazing. Thank you for sharing. Right. So that also brings me to your TED Talk. Everyday creativity really resonated with educators, of course, and many students say, like, I'm not creative. So, how can teachers help remove those barriers and nurture creativity in every learner?
Yeah, I think that's important. I think it's a problem with adults as much as students. I think, like, this is something that is my life goal, is helping people understand what creativity is, and what it isn't. So often people think of creativity as like drawing, and like very traditional sort of things. And you can be creative in whatever you're doing. I think it's just bringing an innovative approach. So I love creative exercises, things that will make you stretch your creativity. And I find that one of the ironic elements is that if you want to help people be creative, one of the things you need to do is add limitations. So, I think that's kind of key. If I just say, like, be creative, no one really knows what to do. But if I say, like, okay, I want everyone to make a self portrait. So, but I don't want you to use any artistic elements, whatever. So you only need to use objects around the room. Then I'm putting you inside of a box, and it makes it much easier to be creative and find a creative result. And then I'd like to just celebrate the creative choices that people make. So, like, sometimes they're using all, leaves and rocks and things like that, and pieces from nature. And other times they're using Cheetos. So you never know what they're going to use. And I think that's where you see the creative element. So I created a ton of different creative exercises. Some of them I put up on my YouTube for other teachers to use that are successful. So I think, I like to do a creative exercise once a week with my students, just to help strengthen those creative muscles, because I think creativity is one of those things that you can get better at. So it's like, some people are born with a natural creativity, but I think it's something you can improve, and it's like a muscle you could strengthen. And like, boy, does it help you approach difficult situations when you have creative confidence, and you understand that you're going to find a solution, and it's just a matter of time and persistence.
Absolutely. I think it really helps you to keep you on your toes.
Yeah,
And besides, like reading is a good way to be creative. But if you're in a classroom, I think just pushing them by giving them limitations
right.
is like gonna help make them think, okay, I don't have the basic things with me, but how do I remove the not creative to experiencing creativity without, thinking about it in a way that, okay, I'm not being able to use creativity. However, with such exercises, you're actually pushing yourself in a good way to spark that creative side of you, which is there with everybody. You just need to channelize it, and that keeps you more alert, and it pushes the learners to think in new ways. And that's a really cool idea of making portraits, like with Cheetos or with things in the nature. That's really interesting, and it reminds me of like during my school time, we used to have such activities in the classroom where you're given limitations to do certain tasks, and that really helps you to collaborate and think with your friends that, okay, we don't have the basic things, how could we be more creative? And sometimes you come up with the funniest solutions, but they turn out to be the best ones.
Absolutely, yeah. Is that the thing? I think it's always important for teachers to put themselves in the mindset of learners sometimes. So, like, I will go into situations where I know nothing about the subject, and it's overwhelming, and it could be, kind of a scary situation. But if you feel creative, like you know that you'll find a solution. Like, I think language classes are great, because it's like you sit in a room where you don't understand the language, and then you'll start
Mhm.
picking things up and like
Yeah.
noticing things, and then you'll understand like the tie from one word to another in another
Mhm.
language and the stem. um, yeah, so I think, like, as a creative person, kind of those creative exercises are key because you're rethinking everything
Mhm.
around you, so it forces you into that more challenging mindset and you get comfortable there, and that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in a language class myself, since been learning Finnish in the university, I can totally relate because we're working around with in groups by doing like role plays or different activities where we have to talk to each other in Finnish. It turned out to be funny sometimes, but yeah, you're learning the language, so that's the key.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. And again, we've had like I think really good points to discuss today. And before we wrap up, what message would you like to give to the young people and educators listening to you today?
I always like to leave all my talks with, be kind, be creative, and change the world. I think that's sort of the message that I always like to instill. Every day is another chance to be creative. And I think, even if you just rethink one or two little things in your life, it will make a big impact. So, there's that Japanese philosophy of just one little piece each day, makes a big difference over time. So, best of luck. And I hope everyone, this week could go and try to look at something through a different creative lens.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that beautiful message. And today's conversation was really focused on, creativity as the heart of future ready learning. And we were able to discuss art as an essential part of STEM, AI as a tool, that amplifies human creativity rather than replacing it. And of course, the importance of designing learning around learners and not the tools. And of course, that all takes up to reimagining the classroom and using thoughtful constraints that show how agency, curiosity, and creativity can be nurtured in every student. So thank you so much, Tim. It was lovely discussing a lot of beautiful thoughts with you today, and it was an amazing opportunity to have you on board on the podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining and listening. I'll see you in the next episode. Till then, each one, teach 10. Have a nice day. Moikka.